Have you noticed that the YouTube experience has been getting worse and worse for free users? This has been a trend since basically the beginning of YouTube, but 2023 has been especially pivotal. It seems that every month Google is trying a new strategy to maximize how many ads viewers see. For example, in May, YouTube started blocking AdBlock, something that they had tolerated for YouTube's entire history. YouTube has even gone as far as disabling video playback for people using AdBlock, and that's just the most obvious example. YouTube has also started experimenting with 30-second unskippable ads, and they're even moving to take some ad control away from creators, presumably to optimize ad impressions and maximize revenue. And it's not just YouTube either. It seems that every free service is undergoing a similar evolution. Discord's free stream quality, for example, has fallen substantially over the past several years. And don't even get me started on free mobile games, which are basically unplayable at this point with all their ads. The funny thing is that you can even argue the same thing about paid services as well. Netflix's lowest tier, for example, now has ads. Now, I don't blame these platforms, and I can't speak for everyone, but most of these free platforms have offered tremendous value for me over the years, whether it's entertainment, education, or social connection. So I think it's completely fair for these platforms to want to earn revenue for providing this much value, but it does make me question the viability of freemium. Of course, freemium is a great avenue to break barriers and make services more accessible, but should freemium really be the default mode of monetization? Because it seems that this just leads to the same dead end every time. These platforms eventually get worse and worse for free users until users either leave or end up paying. So join me as we take a look back at the tech industry's obsession with freemium and why the days of freemium may finally be coming to an end. To understand how freemium became so popular, we first have to take a look back at what convinced the tech industry about freemium in the first place. At first glance, you might be inclined to think that the culprit is Google or Facebook or the slew of VC-backed money-burning startups, but the culprit is actually none other than Microsoft. I'm of course talking about Windows and Microsoft Office. Now, this might be a bit confusing as neither Windows nor Office was ever free, but this is how freemium used to work. The official software itself cost money, but it was relatively easy to get the software for free if you wanted to. Bill Gates was well aware of this. In fact, he openly admitted it and even sort of encouraged it.
We want them to steal ours. They sort of get addicted, and then we somehow figure out how to collect sometime in the next decade. So it's a great place to be involved in, and it was a lot of fun, which was, I guess, the key goal.
Eventually, Microsoft did shift their focus to monetizing users instead of growing users. This was primarily by getting computer manufacturers as well as schools and employers to pay for the software, and this turned out to be a massive success. Microsoft is now the second largest company in the world and sometimes even larger than Apple. Companies like Google and Facebook, as well as a bunch of VCs, saw this and tried to replicate this formula in a bunch of other niches. But there was one crucial difference between what Microsoft did and what all of these other companies did. With Microsoft, even though users never feel the pain of directly paying, they are indeed directly paying. With new laptops and computers, for example, the price of the software is just directly built into the cost of the machine itself. With schools, the cost of the software is directly coming from the tuition or local taxes. And with companies, the cost of the software is directly coming from the bottom line, which just means that all employees will receive slightly smaller salaries, lower bonuses, and you get the idea. The bottom line is that with Windows and Office, Microsoft has done a great job with masking the cost, but it's still the end user that's paying for the software directly. With new age companies though, that's not the case, which brings us into the first major pitfall of freemium, the friction of monetization. The reason that YouTube's monetization efforts feel so significant is because there's so much friction when it comes to indirectly monetizing our use of the platform. For example, let's say that YouTube on average earns $4 per 1,000 views, and that the average view is worth 5 minutes of watch time. If you watch 1 hour of YouTube per day, you're averaging about 12 views per day or 4,380 views per year. But all of this translates to just $17.52 worth of revenue for YouTube. Put another way, 365 hours of watch time is not even worth 18 bucks. For perspective, subscribing to YouTube Premium from an iPhone costs more per month. AKA, YouTube would have to increase ads by a factor of 12 to make casual users as lucrative as paid users due to all the friction. Instead of directly earning revenue from users, YouTube is having to wait for users to spend money on advertisers' products. Maybe 10% of this revenue gets put back into marketing, out of which 10% is actually spent on YouTube marketing. From there, YouTube has to give about 50% to creators, meaning that at the end of the day, YouTube is only left with max 0.5% of the total revenue that their free users generate. Obviously, this is not all that great of a monetization strategy, but despite that, the entire industry would jump in. Whenever a given business works, other entrepreneurs and VCs naturally try to reverse engineer what made the business so successful. With companies like Microsoft, Google, and Facebook, the answer seemed obvious. It was obviously the users that made these businesses so successful. In reality, there was much more to this than just that. For example, a solid strategy to monetize these users is also equally important. But many businesses and investors would solely fixate on just the first half of the equation: users. If they could just dominate a given industry in terms of market share, they could worry about collecting later. And one of the primary reasons that we got into this vicious cycle of user growth over profits is due to low interest rates. With near zero interest rates, many investors simply didn't know where to put their money to earn solid returns. So they slowly put their money in riskier and riskier investments, leading to a startup boom. I mean, just take a look at this graph. Global funding grew by 20x between 2006 and 2021. But the good news is that this insanity is finally starting to slow down, as investors now have a new place to put their money: treasuries. If you're not familiar with treasury bills and bonds, it's basically a way to help fund our government. When you invest in treasuries, you're basically lending money to the government to help fund public projects and social programs. And in return for helping the government fund these programs, the government will pay you back with interest of currently 5%. This is where the biggest corporations and investors have been putting all of their cash, and we wanted to create an easy way for everyday investors to do the exact same thing. And that's why we created our bond investing platform, Silo. With Silo, you can invest in government and corporate bills and bonds with the protection of $500,000 in SIPC insurance and $2.5 million in FDIC insurance, all from the comfort of your phone. If that sounds enticing, please consider checking out Silo in the description below. But anyway, this strategy of user growth over profits largely worked for much of the 2010s. As long as companies were able to show phenomenal user growth month over month and year over year, their valuations would keep increasing, they would be able to raise more money, and everybody was happy. The only problem with this strategy though is that if you pursue it for long enough, you eventually just run out of users. Everyone who could possibly use your app or service is already using it. For most tech companies, this happened right after COVID hit. With everyone stuck at home, these companies experienced a final surge before achieving market saturation. And now, all of a sudden, their abysmal revenue per user actually matters. Likely the best example of this is WhatsApp. There's no question that WhatsApp is virtually ubiquitous with over 2 billion active users. But the same cannot be said about their revenue. In fact, WhatsApp doesn't even generate $1 billion in annual revenue, despite controlling a quarter of the world population. And a lot of this just has to do with the fact that there is no straightforward way to monetize a messaging application. And this brings us into the next major pitfall of freemium, which is that it trains these users to expect these services for free. WhatsApp used to be free till yesterday, so why can't it just keep being free? YouTube used to allow adblock till yesterday, so why can't they just keep allowing it? The answer is that doing so is not only expensive, but quite unprofitable. And the only reason these companies put up with it for so long is to hopefully convince you that the given platform is of value. Most users are aware of this, but at the same time, they don't care either, and I mean, why should they? It's not their responsibility to worry about whether Google or Meta is making money. All that matters to them is how much value they're getting from a platform or service, and when that perceived value goes down due to more ads or higher subscription fees, they're naturally gonna be upset. If anything, it's these companies' fault for setting the expectation that these services are free. They went along with it because it was beneficial in the short term in terms of user growth, but the same cannot be said about the long term. And that brings us into the current crisis that much of tech is facing, the need to monetize. The bottom line is that the party is over. Whether you're a startup that has relied on VC funding or you're a tech giant like Google, the days of putting user growth over profits are behind us. These companies are moving to monetize as quickly as possible, and they're having to face all of the issues that they had previously ignored, like the friction of indirectly monetizing users, and users' unwillingness to suddenly pay for things that they have been using for free for literally decades. And all of this is very much painting these companies as the villain. Oh, it's so annoying that Netflix is raising prices and cracking down on password sharing. It's so annoying that YouTube is blocking adblock and stuffing in more ads and so on and so forth. These companies can of course continue to experiment with their more creative modes of monetization, but honestly, the better solution is probably just to ditch the freemium model. The reality is that for many of these platforms to truly be viable with free users, the user experience would have to be degraded by such a ridiculous amount that it makes no sense. Take YouTube for example. Let's say YouTube wants to earn just $5 per user per month. I think most of you would agree that that's a reasonable amount. For YouTube to achieve this with the average user who watches, let's say, 1 hour of YouTube per day though, YouTube would have to show about 10 minutes worth of ads every hour, and that's assuming that they earn $4 per 1,000 views. In most niches, that's not the case, meaning that YouTube would have to show even more ads, like 15 to 20 minutes per hour. I don't know about you, but that doesn't seem all that enticing to me, and I suspect that these companies are coming to the exact same realization. To earn any sort of meaningful revenue from free users, they would basically have to destroy the platform with ads or data collection or payment for order flow or whatever new age mode of monetization they're using. As such, I suspect that the main reason that YouTube is cracking down so hard on adblock and pushing ads is not to better monetize free users, but rather to simply push free users to become paid users, as I think this will become the new norm. The new norm will not be freemium, the new norm will be paid. These platforms will of course keep around their free versions, but I suspect that these will be more like light versions that are watered down and noticeably worse than the paid versions. This would obviously be a massive shift from what we've been used to over the past 2 decades, but hopefully it'll be for the better. With users directly paying for these platforms, hopefully we can move past more shady modes of monetization like data collection and payment for order flow and things of that nature. Or who knows, maybe companies will just end up doing both and things get worse than ever. Are you a fan of freemium or would you rather pay for your services? Comment that down below. Also, it seems that all of these money-burning startups who just focused on growth are currently getting their funding pulled. Check out this video to learn more, but until then, I'm Hari, and I'll see you guys on the next one.